In this video, we're going to take a look at this awesome looking custom fully 3D printable Mini-ITX computer case that I designed and built. It measures only about 9.7 liters in size and it's got some pretty nice gaming capable hardware on the inside. Let's have a look at how I put this thing together, starting with a little bit about the designing process. I started off by making the plate for the motherboard, and I made the holes a bit longer than they really needed to be just to have some room to adjust the final position of the board, making sure to leave enough room in the top as well to fit the fan I had in mind. Then I copied the dimensions to the opposite side so that I would have equally sized panels. I did some measurements to make sure I had enough clearance to the graphics card and made a mounting plate for the SFX power supply. Then I had to make a base plate with mounts for the side panels as well as having ventilation holes and feet to lift the intake vent off the table. Then I made a top plate for the 140mm exhaust fan and for attaching the side panels to the top. Because I wanted the air to be forced as much as possible through the case, I made this rear plates to cover up all the open space in between the power supply, motherboard and the GPU, just to make sure the air was sucked through the bottom instead of just in through the back. I also made this fin on the power supply plate just to force as much of the fresh air as possible to the CPU cooler instead of just going straight up cooling nothing. Then it was onto the outer shell. The outer shell is mainly put together with a bunch of 30 by 30mm squares that I put together to form this super cool looking 3D square pattern and completes the whole look of this build. I made sure to keep a bit of clearance to the frame so it would slide on easier during mounting. I would also make holes that go into the fan mounting plate to bind everything together, as well as holes in the bottom plate to lock the cover in place. The last piece to design was the top piece, where I just traced the pattern of the outer shell and made a plate with a big open square in the middle, and then designed the air vent piece separately with the mounting hole for the power button, as this would be printed in a different color. The cool thing about this design is that it could be printed in any color you'd like, and there's a bunch of cool color combinations you could be printing to fit your style. Here you have some examples of other color combinations. As you can see, there are many cool designs you can do for this build. A few things to note is that the maximum GPU length you could fit in this case would be about 175mm. I designed this case specifically for the parts I had available, and the one I used had a length of 170mm. Also, make sure your filament is dry before printing this, as I did not dry mine, which resulted in tiny blobs all over the finished look. It's not critical, but it definitely looks better if the blobs are not there. Now, let's see a little bit about how this thing is put together. I will first go through the specific parts I used for this build. I will also towards the end shortly go through some performance testing and hardware temperatures, just to give you an idea of what this specific setup is capable of. For the parts used in this build, we've got this Asus ROG B460i Mini-ITX motherboard, an Intel Core i5-10400 processor. We've got the Noctua L9i CPU cooler. For the graphics card, I used a Gigabyte 1660 Super ITX graphics card, and I've got 16GB of HyperX DDR4 RAM. The power comes from a Corsair SF450 SFX power supply. There's no room for hard drives in this setup, so I've used 1TB of Kingston A2000 M.2 SSD as storage for this build. And last, the exhaust fan I used is a Noctua 140mm PWM fan. A complete parts list including screw sizes will be in the description below, as well as links for the specific products I used. Here's a short video of the assembly process. I will not be talking for this part, it's just to give you an idea of the order everything is put together. I am really pleased with how this build turned out. It looks absolutely amazing in my opinion, and it has a very clean minimalistic look to it. Looking at performance, here's an example of me playing Warzone at 1080p high settings. As you can see, I get an average of about 85 FPS with a GPU temperature that is only about 65 degrees on average during gaming. During a stress test, the max CPU temperature reached was 73 degrees, but that was mainly in the start of the test before the fans had time to catch up. Then after a few seconds it went right down to below 70 and stayed around there, which really isn't bad for such a small and compact setup. That's it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, feel free to leave a like. I'm currently in the planning of another 3D printable ITX case that will be a little bigger, but this time leaving room for a bigger graphics card and a cheaper ATX power supply, as well as extra storage. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this video. There are definitely more fun projects coming up. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below.